Well, Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Ariel Bar Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School, found online at www.KosherTorah.com. We are in the week of the Christian holidays, countdown towards Christmas. So tonight we're going to have a class which I must confess I've talked about these things many times before, and we are going to compare the Jewish history of the historical Yeshu HaNotzi versus the Christian traditions of Jesus Christ. And yeah, as we're about to see, they're not really much like one another. And like I said, as we're about to see. Now, like I've said, I've talked about this before. I tried to include in the description of this course a link to my 23-hour series on an Orthodox Rabbi reads the Christian Bible, specifically the Gospel of Matthew. We went through with a fine-tooth comb, and to explain the things that we're going to talk about tonight, as well as my essay, which is in video form on YouTube, Can Yeshu Actually Be the Messiah of Israel? Now, if whatever reasons in the descriptions that's not correct at this very moment, I'll make sure that it is for the future. But with that being said, right from the start, let me just tell my Christian listeners, Merry Christmas to you. How can an Orthodox rabbi who is about to talk about Yeshu from a historical point of view wish you a Merry Christmas? Honestly, because I mean it. You know, if you look into history, look at the development of humanity, Christianity played a very important role in humanity's evolution. Even Maimonides made a point of this. So, regardless of relationship of church to synagogue or Yeshu to Jesus, the church came on to the scene of an ancient world in which things like human sacrifice and the like were still all too common. Oh, hello, Crypto. Yes, my canine son is here. Yes, boy, how are you? You want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas too? Okay. Merry Christmas from myself, the Rabbanit, from Crypto, Sierra, and even little Lavana. Okay? Okay, go behave yourself. So anyway, getting back to this, what I was saying here. You go back into ancient times, and people were doing really bad stuff like human sacrifice. Everyone wants to talk about the deplorable invasion of the Europeans into the Native Americas. Well, yeah, the Aztec and the Mayans and all the rest, they weren't exactly what we would call bastions of morality. You go look up their history. And when Christianity came in, yeah, it was pretty nasty, but it got them to stop all of those disgusting things that they were doing, human sacrifices and the like. Even Mel Gibson, I believe, made a movie about it. Mel Gibson, remember, is not a good friend of the Jews, but Apocalyptico, I think was the name of his movie, in which he portrayed the behavior of the pre-European times here in the Americas. And good gosh, you want to talk about, they weren't savages. My goodness, remember the Mayan calendar stuff. These guys were advanced in many, many ways, but they just had a deplorable disregard for human life. Well, it was in the olden days. Christianity came, and for the most part, changed a lot of that. Now, granted, Christian history is, in all due respect, full of blood. Can't deny the history on that. Not just towards Jews, but towards Muslims, pretty much anybody else who disagreed with the church. Ask the Cathars, amongst others. But it was still better than what it was. You know, I once heard people tell me with regards to Yeshu This class is going to the dogs. Woof, woof. I once heard somebody tell me, with regards to the teachings of Yeshu, that they wanted to go back and know and practice biblical Judaism. They don't like what we rabbis have to say. They want to go back and practice biblical Judaism. And I roll my eyes. I say, you don't want to go back and practice biblical Judaism? Please, no. Why? Go back and look at what Judaism was in the days of Eliyahu Hanavi, in the days of King Manasseh, son of Hezekiah. These guys were not nice guys. They used to sacrifice their children to Molech. Yeah, they would burn their children to death. These people were, Baal worshippers. Ask Eliyahu. Yeah, biblical times, biblical Judaism was pretty much, except for the faithful remnant, it was pretty messed up. And so it is today, where if you look at modern Judaism, how many in the Jewish world are actually faithful to Torah? You have everybody who wants to, I'm faithful to Torah, I'm faithful to Torah. Oh yeah, I'm faithful to Torah when I do this, I'm faithful. And you got every group under the sun that claims to be faithful to Torah. And I'm not going to disparage or name names, because I never do that. But boy, oh boy, got a lot of crazy stuff today that we can indeed use the phrase of King Solomon, Ein kol hadash tachat hashemesh. There's nothing new under the sun. So yeah, we've had development. We've had growth. And even with Christendom and our brothers and sisters in Islam, with all the political problems and infighting back and forth, our two younger siblings have really brought a lot of evolution and development to the world. That's not my opinion alone. That's Maimonides amongst many others. So, when a Christian references Christmas, they don't argue and debate whether the historical Yeshu was born on the 25th of December on the Saturnalia, or whether it was some other time of year. I mean, you go into Christian websites, even the Vatican, people will tell you that they know that 25th of December probably was not the birthday. So what? It's the message that counts, not the historicity of it. And if Christianity makes Christians better human beings, I'm 100% all for it. So if you talk about Christmas and you say peace on earth and goodwill towards men, which is what Christmas is supposed to represent, not just presents and Santa Claus and materialism, by all means, I'm for it, and I will wish you that Merry Christmas. Because that is our way of doing things. It's not so much important, the history. Now, let's talk about the history. Now, just remember this. We are here in a video conversation, video chat. I will read your texts if I can. And we are going to discuss something that has been hotly debated for, 2,000 years? I will tell you with pretty much confirmation, we're not going to resolve anything tonight. I don't expect to convince anybody of anything. And I'm not going to plan on doing such a thing. I have always said, if you are a Christian and Jesus has meant something in your life, then I encourage and applaud and support your faith, regardless of who or what you are. If Jesus makes you whole, and if Jesus makes you a better human being, then by all means you stand by Jesus. And, I don't know, is it true, is it not true? I don't care. I care about what you do and how you live in this life. Because remember, one of the major points of difference between the Jewish and Christian faiths is this concept of salvation. The Christian always concerns themselves with, how do I get saved? For the Jewish faith, there's no such question. If someone says to you or to us, are you saved? They say, saved from what? There is no such concept. It's eternal damnation. Sorry. No such concept in the Jewish Bible. No such concept in the Jewish religion. Nope, does not exist. You can point to different rabbinic teachings and everything else, and I'll give you an education about rabbinic teachings that you may not know. Does not exist in our faith. There is no separation from God, original sin, or anything of the kind. So when a Christian comes with their 4 spiritual laws, all men have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Yeah, okay. So that's why we try our best to be better human beings. Well, you will never be a perfect human being. Yeah, I probably won't. Well, that means you're going to go to hell because you don't have the blood of the atonement. I don't need blood of atonement. Well, Leviticus 17, I think verse 11 says you have to, right? For by the blood you're atoned. Okay, let's not talk about sacrifices and the like, please. I'll quote you 1,000,000 verses in Scripture, and you're not going to listen to them any more than you do now. So I'm not going to argue with my Christian listeners. I started our KosherTorah school under our original name, Yeshivat B'nai Nevi'im, back in 1992. Time flies when we're having fun. Coming up on 30 years. We started out as an anti-missionary, anti-cult organization. And I've debated with the best of them. No, I'm not going to mention names. Some of our old conversations with old missionaries got so heated that some of them even complained. Some of these missionaries I have found were very Jewish anti-Semites. And this is a problem because not all Christians are anti-Semites. Not all Christians teach anti-Semitism. Does anti-Semitism and Jew hatred continue to this day in certain circles of Christendom? But of course. And in case you haven't known or don't know, you have anti-gentilism in certain circles of Jews as well. You know, as they say, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Things go both ways. Most people aren't going to confront Christian anti-Semitism or admit to Jewish anti-gentilism, right? Because the level of power between the two is so overwhelmingly off that who's going to pay attention? Well, we're going to pay attention. We're going to talk about this stuff right now. The historical Yeshu. I've written in many a post on Facebook and elsewhere. The historical Yeshu never really made that much of an impression in Jewish history. Okay? You need to understand another foundational difference between Judaism and Christianity today. Yes, Crypto. Are you going to teach this class tonight? Are you going to teach this class tonight? Yes? No? Okay. If you don't know Crypto, Crypto's Texas' son. All right? Crypto's head's about this big. If he lifts it high, you'll see. He looks like little Levana. Remember when Levana was so small? He's gotten big. It's kind of like a problem. It goes small and grows big. The historical Yeshu, in his day, was never really much of a significant power or influence in Judaism. This is the history. You will never find a real historical reference to Yeshu in Judaic literature of the time. Now, there are a number of places that people point to, like there is a reference to Yeshu in Josephus. Somebody quoted it recently as a statement to prove the historicity of Yeshu. Roll your eyes, please. Go do a Google search on Yeshu, or if you will, Jesus, in Josephus, and see the controversy on this. This is such a well-known contested passage that you cannot use it for any claimage of history. We in Judaism acknowledge Yeshu was historical. Yeshu lived, not even a question about it. The Masorah, or the teachings about Yeshu, that are brought down in the Talmud are far, far after the fact. The teachings about Yeshu in the Talmud, I'm not the first rabbi to mention this, many others throughout all of history, acknowledge and admit they're polemic. They are intentional legendary stories, midrash, specifically intended to be derogatory. Why would Jews want to be derogatory against Christians? Oh my goodness. Are you familiar with the writings of the Christian fathers and what they wrote about the Jews? How Jews were dirty, rotten scoundrels, were all sons of the devil, all deserved to be damned to hell, were abandoned and cursed by God, on and on and on and on. Well, how do you think people are going to respond to such attacks? When you read the church fathers' attacks, and this is the first century, second century, vicious, vile attacks, which later became crystallized in the Catholic Church. Well, Jews, in all due respect, responded in like kind. So you have tit for tat. But from a scholarly point of view, we recognize that most of the stories, specifically those that have been organized in the nefarious books like Toldot Yeshu, the stories of Yeshu, this is all derogatory slurs, tit for tat. Now, you might remember recently is 500 years, I guess, Martin Luther. Martin Luther, famous founder of Protestantism, is renowned for his vicious anti-Semitism. Was quoted by Adolf Hitler all the time. He's the one who said, rather than convert a Jew, I'd rather tie a millstone around his neck and drown him in a well. Lovely, lovely Christian love. The historical Yeshu. Who was he really? What source of information can we turn to actually discern this? Now, here is where being an Orthodox rabbi comes in as an advantage. Because who was Yeshu? Obviously, he was the first Christian. It's a dramatic pause here. The camera didn't break, but hopefully your brain should have. He wasn't the first Christian. What are you, nuts? Yeshu was a rabbi. Born a Jew. Was his father Joseph? Was his father Pandera, the Roman centurion? Was his father the Holy Spirit? I don't know. Never did a blood test. And I don't care. If he wants to be the son of a virgin, Mazel Tov. Every Jewish boy believes his mother is a virgin. You should know that. Go ask the Jewish boys. They'll tell you about their mothers. But on a serious note, when you look at Matthew and what he wrote about the virgin birth, Matthew didn't mean a virgin birth. He never meant the virgin birth. He is making a reference to Isaiah 7:14 in a traditional Jewish way of what we call midrash, in which it is meant to give a symbolic representation and association. The child who is referred to in Isaiah 7:14, behold, a woman is pregnant, she's going to give birth. That child was born in the next chapter, in Isaiah chapter 8. It was meant to be a sign of the day. But it was a special child to be born, a special symbol. That's what Matthew, the Talmud of Yeshu, is trying to say. You don't think that Talmidim, students of the Rebbe, always aggrandize their Rebbes? That goes on to this day. Have you ever read Art Scroll? Oh my goodness. Have you ever read Art Scroll about the rabbis? You think every one of them was an angel incarnate who comes down to earth. No one does any wrong. They're the holiest, most great and holy pious. To think about them being actual normal human beings, God forbid. This embellishment is a common typical thing. So when I read about the followers of Yeshu embellishing their rabbi, gee whiz, as we say in Kol Chadash Tachad Shemesh, nothing new there. I don't expect them to do anything else. That doesn't make everything that they said to be true. Oh, that's from a Christian point of view a blasphemy. It's not the gospel truth. Well, from your acceptance of the gospel of Jesus Christ, of course it is. But from the teachings of the historical Yeshu, they're totally different things. Yeshu, born, raised a Jew, All of his Talmidim were all Jewish. They lived in Israel. They spoke Aramaic. Oh, by the way, for the record, his name, according to our Masorah, we should know because it was our nation, was not Yeshua. It was not Yehoshua. He had an Aramaic name, which was common in the day, and it was Yeshu. Now, some later, hundreds of years after the fact, came and made of that an insult. That it really, Yud Shin Vav stands for Yamach Shemo V'Zichrono. Okay, that's an after-the-fact thing. That's not the history of it. That's not where it came from. This is the Masorah. This is why we call him Yeshu. Now, the Christian Bible, the Gospel specifically, how do we as Orthodox Jews address these things? Well, remember this. What denomination of Christianity did Yeshu, the historical Yeshu, hold or ascribe to? Wasn't Yeshu a Baptist? No. Pentecostal? No. An evangelical? No. Gosh. Are you guys familiar with the Apostolic Creed? The Nicene Creed, which are the foundational creeds of the Christian faith? They are recited in many, many churches throughout the world in whatever language, every Sunday at service or Mass. This is their beliefs. But those creeds are the foundation of the Christian faith, not the teachings of Yeshu. So, what are Yeshu's teachings? Well, he came to preach the gospel. Okay. Well, I know the gospel of Jesus Christ from Christianity, right? You have to be, saved from your sins. You got to believe in Yeshu. Okay, fine. That's Christianity. But the historical Yeshu never read the Christian Bible. But he is said to have preached the gospel. Well, what was he preaching? Well, it's clear that the kingdom of heaven is coming. The kingdom of heaven. What is the kingdom of heaven? Only the Messiah brings the kingdom of heaven. Right? Right. So, if Yeshu, the historical one now, is to be bringing the kingdom of heaven, and the message of the gospel is, be prepared for the coming of the kingdom of heaven. What does that mean in the Jewish context of its originality? Remember, Yeshu never taught, I'm going to die on the cross, and I'm going to go to hell and preach to the dead, and after 3 days I'm going to rise, go to the Father, and atone for all your sins. Yeshu never taught that at all. What was his gospel? Kingdom of heaven is nigh. You go read in the Christian Bible. They weren't expecting some supernatural kingdom of heaven, because the Jews, those are the guys Yeshu spoke to. Remember, he said, don't go to the Gentiles. You go to the house of Israel. Yeshu wasn't exactly the greatest tzaddik that many people want to make him out to be. First of all, he certainly had no taste, no desire for non-Jews. He was a racist guy of his own. He was also very misogynistic. He didn't like women. Yes, if Yeshu was a rabbi of the day, read your Holy Blood and Holy Grail, he must have been married, and most likely really was married to Mary Magdalene, and most likely had children. Did you ever read the book, The Jesus Scroll? Go try to find a copy of that one today. Legend, according to this story, is that a scroll was found at Masada by the leader of the movement, who died up there supposedly, and he claimed that in his earlier day how he had to fake a crucifixion so that he could build an army to fight Rome, which eventually he led an insurrection against, and it all failed at Masada. And that scroll was allegedly signed Yeshu of the Galilee. And many people ascribe this scroll to have been the proof handwriting of Jesus, Yeshu, the historical one, confessing to the whole truth of his life. Now, go try to find this book today. Go try to find the scroll today. You ain't going to find nothing. But it is alleged, mind you, that when this scroll was found by the state of Israel, they said, oh, my goodness. They contacted the Vatican. And they said, hey, Vatican, look what we found. And they said to the Vatican, supposedly, now this is all hearsay, that if you, the Vatican, don't make a 100% turnaround on your relationship to Jews in Israel, we'll publish this. And they claim, well, we know from history, that this is the first time in the history of the church that a pope actually made a trip to the Holy Land, allegedly to see the truth of this scroll. And then right after that, we had the ecumenical councils, where Christianity, Catholicism specifically, after all the centuries, changed their entire relationship to the Jewish people. So the church, Catholic Church, knows very well the historical truths of Yeshu. Yeshu, as clearly demarcated in the Gospels, was an Orthodox rabbi. He was a practicing Orthodox rabbi. He was most certainly not a modern Orthodox rabbi. He was of the most extremist group, very similar to the modern group today called the Neturei Karta, the guardians of the city, the most extremist elements in Mea Shearim in Jerusalem, the Neturei, all right? In Aramaic, that would be called the Nasrani or the Notzrim. The word Notzri, which we call Yeshu HaNotzi, means he was one of the guardian party. He was of the most extremist element in Judaism at the time. They were like a Torah Taliban. And he's surrounded by who? Simon the Zealot, Judah the Sakkari, who was the assassins. His top men were known to be members of terrorist organizations. Everyone has a hard time looking at Yeshu as the terrorist, the violent character that he was. You always think he's this peaceful, loving, little frail guy. He wasn't anything of the kind. And the gospel record is actually clear on this for those who are willing to read it from a scholarly point of view. I'm not the first one to have noticed this. There is a scholar, I believe, from Manchester University. His name is S.G.F. Brandon. Wrote a book long time ago, called Jesus and the Zealots. I would, if you can find a copy that's affordable, I would highly recommend you read it. The Biage Lee Lincoln book, Holy Blood and Holy Grail, which started that whole Dan Brown stuff about Yeshu having a family, he has a history of Yeshu in there too, which, read it carefully. It might make you think twice to accept things otherwise. Now, the historical Yeshu was a very violent man. And people, where's the proof of that? Well, think not that I've come to bring peace. Yeshu said, I've come to bring a sword. Oh, that's symbolic. Well, here's an example of the symbolism. You might remember the famous story when Peter's in the Garden of Gethsemane with Yeshu, and he's armed guard. He's got a sword. And he gets pounced on, according to the story, by the temple guard. Peter takes out his sword, cuts off the ear of the servant of the high priest. Let me tell you something. Any of you know martial arts? Peter's supposedly a fisherman. Do you know how long it takes to learn swordplay? Go talk to somebody of the samurai school and how long it takes you to learn the proper balance and ways and means of a sword. Number one, Peter has a sword. I don't know what a fisherman's doing with a sword. Is he going sword fishing? Number two, he's rather quick to use it. And number three, he's pretty good. Try taking off somebody's ear with a sword. That's only one of many examples. One of the examples that most people don't know. This is my Bible here. It's called the Apologetic Study Bible. It's written by evangelicals. And it is their ways and means to responding to all the, conflicts that people make and challenges to their faith. Well, again, like I said, I don't want to challenge anybody's faith. But if we're going to talk about the historical Yeshu and understand his gospel, then we just got to know the truth about what it says. And a point that I made in the introduction to my 23-hour class on Matthew was, if these books were written by Jews, Torah Jews, because they didn't have any other education. There was no Reformed synagogue down the road or the conservative one on the other side. All right? Sadducees, the Tzadokim at the temple, they didn't go out and reach people and had yeshivas and synagogues. The rabbis were there. The rabbis whom Yeshu himself said in Matthew 25, if I'm not mistaken, he says the rabbis, sages, Pharisees, they sit on the throne of Moses, right? They have Mosaic authority, just like Deuteronomy says. What they say, you do. That's what Yeshu said. When Yeshu said in the Sermon on the Mount, I've not come to abolish the Torah, the prophets. I've come to establish. That word establish means to uphold, support, validate, and vindicate. Not to make it all go away. And he says, not a jot or an iota, like a yud or a vav, would pass until all things be fulfilled. Well, certain people think all things were fulfilled in the resurrection. Really? What about all the other prophecies? Zechariah, Ezekiel, Isaiah. No, everything's not been all fulfilled. So Torah and Halacha are paramount and, absolutely, valid and important for us. And this becomes one of the great schisms between historical Yeshu and later Jesus Christ. But here's a little story about Yeshu. Most people don't know this. It's from Luke 19. It's a parable called the 10 Minas. To sum up this story, it says here that some guy's going away and he gives authority to the 3 of his people, gives them money, he says, I want you to invest the money. And then when I come back, let's see what you did with it. So one guy invested the 10, comes back with an extra 10, says, good for you. One guy invested 5, comes back 5, says, also good for you. One guy doesn't do anything. So Yeshu says like this. This is a quote from Luke 19, verses 26 and 27. He says, I tell you that to everyone who has, more will be given. This is not part of the parable. This is the meaning and message of the parable. So listen to what our love and peace man Yeshu has to say. I tell you that to everyone who has, more will be given. And from the one who does not have, even what he does have will be taken away. You see, the whole concept of this investment, the kingdom of heaven, they wanted an investment in the kingdom of heaven. But this is what Yeshu says, quote, but bring here these enemies of mine who did not want me to rule over them and slaughter them in my presence. That's what Yeshu said. Remember, that's not part of the parable. That is his meaning or interpretation of the parable. Yeshu was a very well-known violent character. And it's because of his violence that put him in direct opposition with our sages. Let's talk prophetically for a bit. This is in the period right before the destruction of the temple. Zealotism was hot-bedded and growing. You want a comparison? Look at extremism in Islam today. All right, somebody's telling me it's very incorrect. No, it's not. And I know the person saying that's an evangelical Christian. Sorry, it's very true. And I know you're not going to be able to handle it. And I'm not going to apologize to you. And I'm not going to debate with you. All right? I know what you believe. I get it. Okay? But it's what it says. You deal with it. Going back to what I was saying. Hotbed of activity. Very similar to times of religious extremism today and in the past. Our sages saw the future. They were of that prophetic school. They knew what was coming down the pike. And the last thing in the world they wanted was conflict and strife and civil war, which they knew they would not win. Well, Yeshu and his followers wanted the kingdom of heaven. Read your Gospels. Remember, they were written by Jews. So therefore, anything that is in the Gospels that agrees with, corresponds to Orthodox Judaism, we can recognize as valid. But anything that doesn't, you can rest assured came from later additions or interpolations and the like. And that's exactly how I have to come to these teachings. Because when you look at Yeshu's teachings, they were pretty much Jewish. There was nothing greatly significant in what he taught. Most Christians are not familiar with the Judaic origins of what Yeshu taught. And therefore, when they hear some of his profound and wise teachings, they don't know that he's quoting our sages. He's quoting Rabbi Akiva, well, not Rabbi Akiva, he came afterwards. He was quoting Rabbi Hillel. He was quoting some of the other great sages of the day, because he was of that time. If Yeshu was not of the violent character that he was, he might very well have just been another Tana and reading about him in the Mishnah, like Rabbi Yossi or any of the others. Could have happened, but it didn't. Now, someone's asking me about Toldot Yeshu. I already spoke about Toldot Yeshu. Clearly, a polemic of intentional incitement. Very similar to a lot of Christian material, which is intentional polemic incitement against Jews. Tit for tat. But getting back to our story here. Yeshu, it's very clear, was trying to build an army. This was his gospel. The kingdom of heaven, not from heaven coming down with forgiveness of sins, but the restoration of the monarchy of Israel. This kingdom of heaven of his was a Jewish kingdom of heaven. And that is what he wanted to bring. He was bringing a specific military agenda. He wanted to restore the Davidic house. Was Yeshu himself of the house of David? We don't know. Matthew brings down a genealogy. Luke brings down a genealogy. They don't match one another. Either genealogy is rather problematic to establish any kind of link to the authority of the Davidic house. And also, remember, if he's allegedly the son of God, well, then he has no human father, and he would be disqualified from inheriting anything of any title from anywhere in a Jewish situation. If his father, if he was a Kohen, he wouldn't have been a Kohen. He could not be a house of David. It doesn't matter what his mother is. And I know others who say, well, this one says this and this one says that. You know what? Forget all, you know what? Our Judaism says 1,000,001 things. Doesn't matter. Because we hold by what we hold. And that's that. So don't go looking for peripheral ideas, footnotes to issues. Stick with the real deal. So the historical Yeshu, violent man as he was, we have our own Masorah, our own teachings. And in the first century, I was recently asked, does any rabbi specifically mention it? And I said, probably not. None that I actually know that mention a historical reference. What was known and understood about Yeshu was known because of the oral traditions. Judaism's a big oral tradition guy. This is what we are. And somebody also is always, the missionaries today want to make an association to Yeshu with the character called Mashiach ben Yosef, the suffering Messiah who comes before Ben David. Well, that's all very well and nice. But if you look through history, I don't think that the concept of Mashiach ben Yosef existed in the day of Yeshu historically. But I will tell you something that did. And that was the supernatural character who was supposed to come and somehow redeem Israel. Remember what that redemption of Israel meant. It was to free them from Roman oppression. So, you have in Enoch the great grandiose image of the character who later be called Metatron. And I've seen many people say, well, Metatron was a pre-incarnate Jesus. Was he? Well, if that's the case, then Jesus was Enoch. And you're saying that Jesus was the reincarnation of Enoch? Oh, Christians don't like reincarnation. They used to, but not anymore. The historical Yeshu was a man of political focus and means. That is what his historicity was. In the book of Acts, there is a claim that they asked Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, what do you think is going to happen with this movement? He just says, we'll see. In other words, he says, like any other movement, we'll see. And the original historical followers of Yeshu eventually petered out. We don't find first century believers in Yeshu. They were kicked out of the church long ago. And let me tell you another thing. The first century followers of Yeshu certainly did not follow the teachings of the Gospels. Not by a long shot. There are a lot of other Gospels that the church got rid of because they were too Jewish. There were things that today people want to call Gnostic. All that weirdo stuff like the Gospel of Thomas. That probably is more true to the original teachings of Yeshu than a lot of the things that have been edited by the Catholic Church over many centuries. You see, this is where our problems lie. What the original teachings were literally kicked out of the church within a century. And the church came and created a completely, comprehensively new understanding and teaching. And that became Christianity. Don't blame Paul. We hold, right, by the Midrash of Shimon Kefa, that Paul was actually sent by the Sanhedrin to infiltrate the movement, to neutralize their messianic military movement by spiritualizing it. Pretty much, he went into a militant movement with the equivalent of New Age teachings and tried to soften it up. Little did he know where it went. But if you actually read in Paul, read Romans, reread Galatians, he wasn't this anti-Torah guy. Not at all. You really got to understand Paul from a rabbinic point of view. He's doing traditional Talmudic pilpul if you really pay attention. But people without the Judaic background don't know how to pay attention to this. 23 hours I covered the whole Gospel of Matthew. Go check it out there. You know I can't do justice to this in a single hour. But getting back to the point, the schism. If you look at Christianity today, that which is the religion of today, which the Catholic Church created through the Apostolic and Nicene Creed. Somebody's asked, is there any proof that Paul was a spy? We just have the stories. Take it or leave it. What can I say? Proof. Yes, he worked for the CIA. How could he work for the CIA? The CIA's modern. Oh, they had a time machine and he went back in the time machine. Ask Doctor Who. Oh, come on. Of course there's no proof of these types of things. They're legends, they're stories. Take it or leave it. All right? Okay? Yeah, the Mossad time machine brought Paul back. There you go. Okay. Yeah. You know what? We can continue saying silly stuff like that, and then we can proclaim that the moon really is made out of Swiss cheese, and give kudos to the flat earthers and say the earth is flat. Look, we're dealing with all of the issues in history. But this is where the big schism is. It doesn't matter what you want to believe about Messiah. But in Torah, in our Judaic tradition, we have a whole ocean of ideas and beliefs about the Messiah. Most of them are what we call Kabbalah or Agada or Midrash. In other words, they're the ideas, the beliefs of their individual authors, and they're mostly symbolic and representational as opposed to literal. In the days of the Second Temple, you had a lot of guys like this who wrote within that context. And it, symbolic stuff, midrashic stuff, all got interpreted literally. And that's a problem. Question here, who was Yeshu's father? We don't know. We don't know. It could have been this guy Pandera. It could have been Joseph. We don't know. It's irrelevant. From a Jewish point of view, again, Yeshu is just a small footnote in our history. And that's it. Christianity took that footnote and made their whole story on it. That's their business. If it makes them better people, rather than sacrificing to Molech or worshiping Baal or doing human sacrifices, all the better. Let them believe in Jesus Christ, the Virgin Mary, whatever they wish. Okay, fine. No problem from my point. But now, moving on. What did the original church do? They made Yeshu, the rabbi, into God incarnate. Don't go pointing to me, Lubavitch. Yeah, there are crazy Lubavitchers today who actually believe that their Rebbe is God incarnate. There are, but they're heretics. Everybody admits that. No, not the Mashiachists. They still want to believe that the Rebbe is sleeping in the grave and that he's going to rise and become a Mashiach. Whatever. Right? I'm not going to make a schism in Judaism because of that belief. We don't believe it. We don't hold by it. But no, they do. Fine. Good for them. Not going to argue about that. All right? It's not worth it. But now getting back to the story here. Once they turned Yeshu into God, and it's all based on a mistake. John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Pretty much, it's true. It is true. It's actually quoted later in different words in the Zohar, Parshat Ekev. But the word for the Word is Logos, which would have really been understood as the Torah. So, in the beginning was the Torah, and the Torah was with God, and the Torah was God. That's Kabbalah. And then later it says, and the Word became flesh and dwelled among us. Let's rephrase that. And the Torah became flesh and dwelled among us. Every rabbi and scholar who embraces the Torah and lives by the mitzvah of devikut, that's applicable to. Now, I don't know what John's original wording was before it was edited by the church, but I recognize the meaning because as a fellow rabbi, that is exactly how we understand it to this very day. We could say, and the Word of God became flesh and dwelled among us with the great rabbis of modern times. Some would say it about Rav Kanievsky in Jerusalem today. Some would have said it about Rav Ovadia Yosef in the last decade or so. Fine. It doesn't make them God, but it might make them, in quote, godly. Now, an evangelical will say, but Jesus said, John 14, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Okay? You're saying that Jesus is God. Let me rephrase. You say Jesus is God and God is the Torah. So let's rephrase that. In the beginning, I am the way. I am the Torah is the way. The Torah is the truth. The Torah is life. No man comes to the Torah. Excuse me. No man comes to the God other than by Torah. Oh, yeah. It sounds kind of Jewish, doesn't it? That's exactly what it was. But people don't get this. This is something that I try to share in the messages of peace and brotherhood. Okay? Don't be so quick to condemn us Jews to hell. We're all evil, Christ killers. No. The Bible makes it very clear, Christian Bible makes it very clear that the Romans killed him. He died on a cross. If he was guilty of real Jewish law, he would have been executed under Halacha, not by the Romans on a cross. By the way, history. Do you know the cross is actually a Jewish symbol? Remember Yeshu said, pick up your cross and follow me? Do you know why he said that? Because thousands of Jewish religious zealots, the terrorists, the Torah Taliban of their day, the seditionists, were all executed by the Roman government. He was calling for martyrs. He was calling for jihad. And he was calling for, what's the word again, for the martyrs? I forgot, the Shaheen? This is what he was calling for. Now, I don't know if he would have been stoned or what, but This is the history. Watch the hand of God as history has worked throughout the centuries. This is why what Rabbi Shimon said, as recorded in the book of Acts, it's probably legitimate, that look at the history stuff. The historical Yeshu fell by the wayside. And like Rambam says, God used Christianity for the purpose of elevating humanity. I don't got a problem with that. I think that's pretty good. But when the Christians turn to the Jews and say, you can no longer observe that disgusting Torah of yours, law, you got to believe in faith. And if you have faith, then you will give up that law. That's how they talk. That's how they really believe. There's such an animosity towards Halacha, towards Judaism. They want us to accept the man as God. Can't do that. They want us to give up the one thing that is the Word of God. The way that you live by it. That's the length of days. Can't do that. And this is why we have to build the bridges to help people understand these things. If you are out there to attack Christianity, I'm going to fight you. Is Christianity actually correct within Torah? Of course not. We all know that. We're different faiths. Deal with it. Respect it. And this is what, to me, is most important. People today, I'm going to share with you a story. A real story happened with us here at the KosherTorah school. Years ago, I had a student who was a rather significant supporter of our school. The person's spouse apparently had some kind of an issue or problem, psychological or abuse with issues, and found salvation in Jesus Christ. And that Jewish person converted and became an evangelical Christian. Well, the supporter of our school joined the spouse and became a Christian. Stopped supporting the school. And so, I have to apologize to you, Rabbi. I believe in Jesus. I said, no apologies necessary. If this is what saved your spouse's life, I applaud it. I'm sorry I couldn't have been greater help. But I'm glad you found something that worked. Remember what our Torah path is. We're not so interested in what you believe. We're not so interested in how you feel. We're interested in what you do, how you live your lives. Because this is what's most important. Morality, discipline, righteousness. These are the common bonds that unite us. And, as you know, one of my pet peeves is certain evangelical groups who are subtly anti-Semitic but will never admit it, who put on the cloak being Jewish, enter into Jewish communities, and they lie. Doesn't evangelical Christianity teach you thou shalt not lie? I know evangelical Christians won't even tell a white lie. If I know evangelical Christians, remember we live in Bible Belt, Tennessee down here. Some of the most righteous, godly people you'd ever want to meet. That's why I love being here. They will not lie about anything. How then did these sons of a gun come into a Jewish community and they claim that they're Jewish? Oh, we're doing it for the glory of Jesus. You lie, you violate the word of your own religion to what? Promote your religion? That sounds pretty sick to me. There is a lot of anti-Semitism in the evangelical movement. And I know this. I'm going to tell you how. Years and years ago, there was a big Jewish missionary. His name was Zola Levitt. He had the big television show on. He wore the kippah, blah, 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 this. And he once gave a show. I used to monitor this stuff. And he gave a TV program where he said, because of my Jewishness, my own Christian brethren refuse to accept me. They are pushing me away because of my Jewishness. I said, oh, that was interesting. I didn't realize that evangelicals would be prejudiced and anti-Semitic even against Jewish believers. I would have thought that would have solved everything. Now, I tried to call Zola Levitt. I wanted to talk with him personally. And, they have the number on the screen, so I called it. And Took about 10, 15 minutes before somebody got back on him and he said, Zola Levitt refuses to speak to any rabbi who doesn't believe in Jesus. They hung up the phone. Talking about prejudice and racism, huh? Goes both ways. They hated him, he hated me. I can't change that. But I can address the issues of lying. All right? If Zola Levitt was going to go into a synagogue, he'd have his big cross on, and he'd be proud of who he was. Let me tell you something. If you're a Christian out there, and I know many of you, and as far as I am concerned, you're my brothers and sisters. All right? I have known people from the Catholic Church. I know people from the Jesuits. I even know people from the Opus Dei, the real ones. And I even know people from the Priory de Zion, the real ones. We all get along fine. We have mutual respect for one another, regardless of our differences. Now, this small group of evangelical Christians, they masquerade and say, Jesus made me kosher. And what is their message? Well, it's first century Christianity. No, it's not. You have no idea what first century Christianity is. Go read the Gospel of Thomas if you want to know what first century Christianity was. They're presenting evangelical Protestantism under Judaic form and trying to tell people that that's the true gospel of Jesus. Gospel of Jesus. No, it's not. It's their interpretation of it. You know something? You have a lot of Christian groups out there. You don't see Catholic missionaries disguising themselves as Jews to infiltrate synagogues. That's right. It's like a spy thing. You don't see Mormons doing this. You know, of all the Christian groups out there, I think the Mormons are the nicest, sweetest. Gosh, I like them. I really, really do. But even evangelicals, they think the Mormons are as demonic as the Jews. Crazy stuff. Jehovah's Witnesses and all these others, they don't do this. When the Mormons wanted to build their campus in Israel, they made a commitment to the Israeli government that they would not proselytize. And guess what? In all these years, they've kept their word. They don't. They're honest. Unlike these sons of a gun. If you're a Christian, and I'm talking about a real believer in Jesus Christ, and you go to a synagogue, introduce yourself to the rabbi, and say, hi, I want to observe your Jewish services. Your rabbi is going to welcome you, going to tell you to sit down. You're not going to put on a yarmulke and a talis and make believe you're Jewish to fit in. No, be proud. Come in wearing your big cross. That's to identify. No. If I was to go to a church there, you know what? I have been invited to churches before, and I have spoken there. And I go with my yarmulke, and I go in, and people know who I am. I have no problem with that. Now, this is why I say you got to be proud of who and what you are, respecting one another. And when I see these lying sons of a gun going out there, they're lying against Jesus. They're lying against their own faith. They're lying against Christianity. They're causing strife and hardship between our communities. Because when we find these missionaries who have infiltrated our community and caused strife and problems and all kinds of religious issues, it causes suspicion, fear of all Christians, and everybody gets suspect. We don't need this. Look at the world body politic going on. I'm not going to get into talk about vaccine and anti-vaccine, red state, blue state, liberal, conservative. I ain't touching any of that. If you got enough common sense, you know where this is going. We need to unite. We need to stand together. And you want to know something? The book of Revelations was originally a Jewish book. Clear as a bell, it was a Kabbalistic visionary stuff. It's, of course, been edited over and over again, and to try to get to the bottom what the original authentic Jewish form was is next to impossible. But there's a very curious statement at the end of chapter 12, if I'm not mistaken, where it speaks about the dragon, the evil empire, if you will, It says it's going to go after the children. And it says those who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of, what says there, Jesus Christ. Well, Christians, they're not the ones who keep the commandments of God. Jews are. Jews, they're not the ones who keep the testimony of Jesus Christ. Christians are. You want to know something? Righteous Christians, righteous Jews, we have so much in common. You disagree on theology? So what? Big deal. There was once a great missionary, I won't mention his name, very, very famous Christian pastor. And I once said to him years and years ago, that I said, on the day when the true Messiah comes, according to tradition, he's going to stand on the Mount of Olives. I pray on that day, I hope you and I are both alive. We can both meet him when he comes. And I pray the first words out of our mouth is not, hey, can you solve our argument and tell us your name? But rather, together we should say, Baruch haba b'shem Hashem. Blessed is he who comes in the name of God. Look, we got enough problems going on. We cannot tolerate infiltrators whose intent is to divide, create conflict, suspicion, and strife. They're all over the place. It reminds me like a swarm of I don't want to get insulting, but you get my message here. If you're one of these people, please, if you're a Christian, be proud of who you are. Don't come into our community lying. Oh, I'm going to make you see the Jewishness of Jesus. You know what? You want to see the Jewishness of Jesus? Take my 23-hour course. You'll see it all. And you'll learn. But that's not going to bring them to the gospel. Well, the gospel that Yeshu, the historical guy, taught, I don't want to bring anybody to that. I don't want to bring anybody to violence. I don't want to bring anybody to insurrection and war and strife and pain and suffering. Yeah, I'm one of those Pharisees. Hopefully one of the good ones. Yeshu, he says Pharisees are whitewashed tombs. And it sounds very anti-Semitic. Most people don't know exactly what was written in the Gemara many years later. There were always religious hypocrites. Oh yeah, the Jews are a bunch of religious hypocrites. Yeah, so are the Christians. And so are the Muslims. And so are the Buddhists. And so are the Hindus. So are the secular. And so is the this one. And so is the that one. Unfortunately, hypocrisy in religion is one of those equal offenders. It knows no bounds and limitations. We should all try to get away from that. So at this time, when Christianity is celebrating the concept of peace on earth and goodwill towards man, I'm going to embrace that with them. And I'm going to wish my fellow Christians out there Merry Christmas. Okay? My fellow brothers and sisters, that's what I really should say. Because I have faith. I have faith in the hand of God. I have faith in the path of God. And anybody who wants to walk with God and is going to be righteous about it and decent and moral and honest, you're okay in my books. And you're always going to be welcome here at our KosherTorah school. And I'm going to teach you stuff. You might not like what I have to teach. Can't help that. But I'm going to teach you the truth. And with me, for those of you who know me, as we say, what you see is what you get. You might not like what you see in me, but that's who I am. And that's what I am. And this is what I have to say. So, I offer you a whole bunch of different stuff. I'm not going to argue theology and doctrine. We know we disagree. I get it. I don't have to prove to you, or you to me, what Isaiah 7:14 means, what Isaiah 53 means. We know we disagree. So what? Deal with it and move on. Just remember, united we stand, or divided we fall. And there's a big, bad enemy out there that's gunning for us. And you all know what I'm talking about. We don't have any more time to play these games. We have no more time to tolerate these infiltrators into our communities who are causing harm to us all. Please, if you have any association, relationship with these people, get them to fess up. Get them to be honest. Get them out of the synagogues. If they say we want to be Jewish, convert. Go to the Orthodox rabbi and convert in accordance to the faith of Orthodox Judaism, if you want to be an Orthodox Jew. And if you're going to be a Christian, darn it, be proud of it. Wear your cross and bear it with pride. And if you want to go out and say, well, Jesus made me whole, God bless you. But just remember, the Torah makes us whole too. And in that respect, united we stand. That's it. That's what I have to share with you tonight. I hope I've given you something to think about and contemplate. I'm going to make sure in the details of this that I have my links to the audio course, to my essays. And please, always be respectful with one another. We're not here to fight and argue and debate. We know we disagree, so disagree already. Call it a day. Let's move forward in peace, because right now we do need each other. I'm Ariel Bar Tzadok, KosherTorah School. Osei shalom bimromav. Hu barachamav yasei shalom aleinu. V'kol amo Yisrael. V'yimru amen. Do you know what that means? May he who makes peace above, may he make peace for us here below. Amen. So may it be as well. God's blessings to you all. Thank you for listening. Shalom.